Well, the design of the 8 to me is unlike any of the other cars that the company has built. If you look at the body style, that single A-pillar rising to no B-pillar down to that big fat C-pillar and the kink makes you know it's a BMW. The instrumentation inside reminds you that it's just like other BMWs, except that this one sets itself apart because it is so futuristic looking. The first time I saw the E31 was from a brochure that my dad brought home. I think it was 1990, and he dropped by the dealer, right? And he brought this thing home and described for me that BMW had taken 2 inline sixes, smushed them together, and doubled the coil count, doubled the spark plugs, doubled the everything in this engine, and wrapped it in this technological marvel of internetworking. The car had its own network. I remember him saying that because we were both into networking at the time. He was really the first time I saw this car come to life. It was through his admiration for how this car had been built that I fell in love with it. The BMW 850 CSI is a 5.6, almost 5.7 liter V12. This is the granddaddy boompa engine of the line. This car has a 6-speed transmission, which was unheard of in the 90s. The horsepower delivered at the factory was 380 horsepower. So after they built this block, the McLaren wanted an engine for their F1, and they came to BMW for it. And so this engine block found its way into the McLaren F1 eventually as the basis for that high-performance race car. It's a heavy car. It's a GT, grand touring car. It weighs about 4,200 pounds. And by today's standards, that's not too heavy, but in the 90s, that was a heavy car. This car's suspension is a little tighter, its steering ratio is a little tighter. So driving the CSI, it's like driving a high-performance GT, a highest performance GT. I remember driving this car down the hill behind a Mini in a rally, and they were quite surprised that I could stay on their tail the whole way down the hill. This car is my car. There's no other car for me. It makes me feel like James Bond driving this car. I mean, this car is the Bond car, or the Bruce Wayne car. My dad, he was always kind of this lone wolf. His mother died when he was young. When I think he was 17, 16 years old, his dad kind of couldn't handle it, so he went to live with his grandmother. I imagine, he grew up kind of pretty lonely guy. He stuck to himself, extremely smart, knew a lot about everything. So he grows up kind of lonely. There was no sense of family from him. His family was cars. His family was his friends and his community that worked on cars. As he got older, life's expenses and paying for kids, it changes, what you can afford. And so he did less and less with cars, just as I was kind of ramping up my interest in cars and ability to buy cars. Being able to pick him up at the airport with this car and hand him the key and then have him drive us home. You should have seen the smile on his face. He had finally experienced that the execution of that passion that he had always had for this car. One of my most memorable experiences was taking my 850, all clean, shiny, to the hilt, in almost perfect condition. And I got to go to the dealership to pick up a part. And I would come out, and the salespeople and the people looking at other cars surround it. They want to know about it. Is this a new model? The car, even today, looks as timeless as it did, as beautiful as it did when it was originally built. And people today mistake it for a 2017 or a 2018 car because you don't see them on the road. That's kind of one of the neat things about this car. It's stuck in time because it wasn't built for very long and there weren't that many built. So when you see them on the road, it's like seeing Sasquatch. It is so rare. When I see another 8 Series driving along the road, I am so excited. And almost always the other owner waves at me as I wave at him. I mean, it's like we don't even know each other, but we do know each other because we both own the dream car that BMW made back in the 90s. It goes back to my dad. I mean, he was a dreamer about technology. I remember him telling me one time, he said, I really wish I could live another 100 years because I want to see what happens technologically. How do we advance, as a species? Where do we go in space and stuff like that? And for me, this car, it being sort of stuck in time is really cool. But I've always yearned to see what BMW would do with a revision, a 2020, a 2025 version of this car, and what kind of technology they would put in it. I mean, cars have become so advanced today. If my dad were alive today and he could see, cars that are self-driving and running on batteries, I mean, he'd be so stoked. With this car, it's almost perfect. I think the last thing I need to do with it is just maybe respray the front, respray the hood, and get it back to its actual pristine dealer perfection. But the problem I have with that is it's just going to get road rash again, and otherwise I wouldn't be able to drive it. It'll be stuck in the garage. So I don't want it to become a garage queen. I want to keep it drivable, and that's what's so visceral and exciting about this car. So maybe I won't do anything. Maybe I'll just keep it exactly the way it is and just drive it.